Hello and welcome to Awful Commentary. Today I'm back with Stephen again. Stephen, I've missed you over the last week.
I've missed you too. It's been
Ah,
I was gonna say a difficult time, but it's not. I'm sorry.
but it hasn't been. That was a lie.
That was a lie. It's been pretty great, to be honest. Not gonna lie.
Fine, I don't even care. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit something about a little bit different to what we normally do. Rather than talking about a specific movie or a specific video game or even an amazing event like E3, we're going to talk about an entire country.
Ooh, that is big. And classically, as soon as we started trying to record this, your audio is really bad in my headset. But never mind, we will power through and continue to talk about which country, Mr. Archer.
Well, we're going to talk about one of the biggest countries. We're going to talk about China, which is quite convenient because it's the country that we both live in.
It is. Dun 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 dun. Or you live in their special autonomous region.
Yes, Stephen lives in Shanghai. I live in Hong Kong, which...
just give them our address, why don't you?
Oh God, they're going to track us down.
Mail the hate
If I said to someone
too.
from Hong Kong that... Yeah, if I said to someone from Hong Kong that I lived in China, then they would probably kill me. But, you know, last year we both lived together in Guizhou, and now we're in two of the biggest cities in the Chinese region. And specifically, what we wanted to talk about was how Chinese influence keeps creeping its way into movies that you otherwise wouldn't expect to have a Chinese influence.
Yeah, speaking is difficult. Primarily Hollywood films, really. Like the biggest and greatest, in quotes, new releases, and how they are, let's say, pandering to the Chinese markets somewhat by ensuring that they can take advantage of the huge market that is now Chinese cinema to kind of get those extra ticket sales and help them climb the ladder of the highest grossing films ever.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think the main focus of our video today is going to be Independence Day Resurgence.
It is.
Because that came out very recently, just a few weeks ago, and as many people have said, why is there so much Chinese stuff in this movie?
Because they're resurging, Dominic. They're resurging. There's a great resurgence.
Nobody resurges quite like the Chinese.
Nope. Or anything. But yeah, there was a oddly large amount of China inside of Independence Day, which on its own I don't think there's a problem with it, but the way that it's handled I do have a problem with.
Yeah, I think that's probably true for most of what we're going to talk about today. So what we could do is let's start with Independence Day first off. The movie did not please me in the same way that the original one did. Like, I'm quite a big fan of the original movie, mostly because of it's so hoorah American that it almost seems like a parody. The movie doesn't take itself too seriously until the moments where it's like, God bless America, and then it seems to take itself really seriously. And that in itself is hilarious.
Yeah, the movie is, Resurgence. The original, again, I didn't have much super love for the original because I don't usually like too much hoorah, fist-bumping American stuff. But, I enjoyed the original and like it. Like, it's a good movie, and I watched it again recently. But it's not necessarily, one of my favourite films ever, and I hadn't seen it in a long time before going into watching Resurgence. But it's just not the same feeling in the new movie, or it doesn't quite recapture that same magic and that same sense of tension and drama that the original one had.
Yeah, that's definitely true, I think. So the main reason that the Chinese influence has kind of crept its way into Independence Day Resurgence is because the highest grossing movies in the world now have a very large income boost from the Chinese region. And the ones that do that are the ones that build upon and exploit the market the most. So, for example, when it came to the Marvel movies, none of the Marvel movies before Iron Man 3 made it into the highest grossing films in China. Like, China doesn't have much love for the Marvel comic book series, or didn't have much love for the Marvel comic book series, until Iron Man 3, where they featured a villain called the Mandarin, who was supposed to be Chinese. Like, the character is supposed to be Chinese, so they got him played by Ben Kingsley, and then it turned out that he wasn't Chinese. But what they did at the end of that movie was there is a scene where Iron Man gets his arc reactor removed. And he's like, I'm not Iron Man anymore, I'm just Tony Stark. And in the movie, you just see him go to a hospital. If you watch the Chinese version of that movie, what you see is he goes to a Chinese hospital and he has like a 10-minute scene where he's like, Chinese hospitals are the best in the world. And then there was a lot of promoting around that. Robert Downey Jr. spent a lot of time in China promoting that movie. And also, Iron Man is exactly the kind of film that should work in China.
Yeah.
Because the Chinese love billionaires, and they love that kind of showy, like the sunglasses, the fast cars, the loose relations with women.
And he's basically
like,
a flying mech robot, which also goes down pretty nicely.
Yes, which definitely helps over here. And so now every movie after Iron Man 3 has made at least 600 million yuan at the Chinese box office alone.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
Yeah, it's a pretty substantial boost to their global sales.
Yes, yeah, it definitely is. And so the problem then, going back to Independence Day, is that when it comes to Independence Day Resurgence, if they want to make their money back off this movie, and if they want to tap into that market, there has to be some kind of nostalgia there, because that's why we wanted to see Independence Day Resurgence. Like, nobody goes, at least in the UK or in America, nobody goes to see Independence Day Resurgence if they haven't seen the first Independence Day, because, you know, you wouldn't have any affiliation to the characters, the planet, the world, all of that. Like, it would mean nothing to you. People are going to see Independence Day Resurgence for the nostalgia of Independence Day.
And it also, the story does continue directly on from the previous one as well. So it does kind of help.
It does.
It means a lot more to you if you know, oh, that's... this character is like, oh, he's still around, or, oh, this person is this now, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is the problem that they had with Independence Day Resurgence, was that nobody in China has seen the first Independence Day movie.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it would never have been released.
About the first Independence Day movie. Yeah, it would have been... Essentially, it would have been illegal to release it in mainland China back when it came out, because it came out in what? 95? 96?
96.
Yeah, 96, wasn't it? Yeah, of course. Because it was 20 years since the previous
20
one.
years.
And it's the same reason that Captain America doesn't do as well as Iron Man in China, is because you'll find a lot of the time in Chinese schools, in Chinese media, that America is not portrayed particularly positively, to put it nicely. In the same way that you might see the Japanese not being portrayed particularly nicely, the Americans also don't get a great rep in China.
Yeah.
So a movie like Independence Day that is so hoorah, America is the best, oh look, America saved the world, that's not going to work in China.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Independence Day Resurgence, to make up for the fact that the world's second biggest market has no affiliation for a movie based off nostalgia, they've thrown in a lot of China. So they've said, this is a unified world now, where it is not just America leading the way. All of the countries of the world have come together, formed one government, one defense against alien invasion, and this unified world is essentially the US and
China. It's just two of them.
And that's pretty much it. Like, that's the world. The world is the USA, China, and then Chinese cities being dropped on London.
Yeah, that's Independence Day Resurgence interpretation of a global unification or whatever is just China and America.
Which is hilarious, because they have Liam Hemsworth, an Australian actor, and they said this is one world, all the people of the world have come together. But that Australian actor must be American, because if he was Australian, then the American market would be like, oh God, we have to listen to an Australian for 2 hours. This is the worst thing since Crocodile Dundee.
This is supposed to be for America. Where's this?
This is supposed to be America.
Why is this Australian guy here doing? What's he doing? Get him off of our screen.
Why is this Australian
Where's Tom
celebrating
Cruise?
Independence Day? Where's Tom Cruise?
No one's more American
Yes, that
than
is-
Tom Cruise. Come on, they should have got him in.
That is true.
They should have got him in that movie. If they couldn't pay Will Smith enough, they should have got Tom Cruise. If I think American actors, Tom Cruise. He should have been in the movie. Tom Cruise. But he wasn't,
Well, I mean, you're-
and he was replaced by lots of Chinese people. Or not lots. Predominantly one incredibly awful Chinese female.
Yes, so let's talk about her role in Independence Day Resurgence, because one of the problems that we were discussing this before. One of the problems that we have with Independence Day is that there are so many unnecessary side characters. Like
Yeah.
throughout the movie, there's so many people who just don't need to be there, and I was explaining to you before. Like you have Liam Hemsworth, and then you have his funny best friend.
Yeah.
And in any other movie, that funny best friend is there to die. He's there because he's a coward, and he's like, "Oh no, aliens! I'm really scared, but I'm really clever." And he's there because, as a coward, he's supposed to find courage and then die. And then his sacrifice is supposed to spur our heroes on to beat the aliens and to be like, "That was for you, funny coward."
We did it.
but in
We
this-
avenged you.
Yeah. We avenged the funny coward in his final act of bravery. But in Independence Day, he doesn't die. And the reason that he doesn't die is because he is in love with the beautiful Chinese character who is played by Angela Baby.
Yes. Isn't she just? And she is.
Isn't she lovely?
She's bloody awful, Dominic.
She is
Absolutely
awful, yes.
bloody awful in horrendous ways. To begin with, Angela Baby, who is a Chinese celebrity, is not an actress. She's not a singer. She's married to a famous actor who I cannot remember who, but I am going to find out right now.
Yeah,
Is it-
Angela Baby is one of those people who is famous for being famous.
Yeah, she's like a Chinese Kardashian,
she's the kind-
as we've kind of said
She
before.
is. Yeah, she is a Chinese Kardashian. And the thing that really makes her famous is she's on the Chinese version of the Korean reality show Running Man. And that's pretty much it. Like, she is in movies. She does act in Chinese movies, but she acts in them solely off of the reputation of her being famous.
Sometimes, yeah. She was in the Hitman reboot recently, as it's quoted on her own Wikipedia page, small role, which I believe she opens the car door for somebody, and they walk out, and that's it. But yeah, she's...
Good job, Angela Baby.
Yeah, she's herself. She plays herself on Running Man and a couple other awful Chinese TV things and awful movies. But
Yeah, and as a point of reference, she's essentially just a pop culture icon in China. Like, she's the kind of person that I bring up in my lessons with my students to be like, "Oh, Angela Baby," and they go, "Oh, teacher knows somebody from China. Oh, that's so funny." Or I might be like, if I have a boy called Andrew, I might call him Andrew Baby,
Oh.
and then all the kids will go, "Oh,
oh, you
that's
are
like Angela
so funny.
I am funny
You
and
are-
cruel
You
because
are the
I
most
don't let that
hilarious
go."
person I've ever seen. But anyway, in Independence Day, it feels like she gets almost as much screen time as Liam Hemsworth and the other poor lad that I keep forgetting the name of. What's he called? Is
Is it Will Smith's son, Dylan? I
yeah,
can't remember the actor's name.
Jesse Usher is his name.
Okay.
I believe.
Well, yeah, she gets a large amount of the same time as him because they're part of the same legacy squadron, aren't they?
They
Like this
are.
international squadron, which means that every time he does something, she is also
Yeah.
there, which gives them like this great chance to cut between the two of them and be like, "Oh, there's so much danger right now."
But the thing that
But
annoys
for
me...
that, she only says about 5 lines in the entire movie.
Yeah, that's the
And
thing
that's
that annoys
essentially
me.
because-
Is that
Yeah.
she has the same amount of screen time, but she doesn't say anything. Because obviously her English is so poor, or she's had to learn English specifically for this movie because she's not fluent in English. So most of the time you see her, the camera cuts to her in the cockpit of her fighter jet, and she's just kind of like gormlessly pouting and looking out of the windscreen of her. You can't see it, but I'm like doing an impression in front of my computer screen of me pouting
I can
and looking
imagine.
out, and then doesn't say anything. And it's kind of like, okay, well, what was the point of this shot? Like, it's not doing anything. I've just wasted 15 seconds of this movie looking at her going. Like, she's just there to be pretty and, again, possibly just be there for the Chinese market.
Yeah, and then there is the other Chinese character is her uncle, who is like the leader of the moon base. Which is
base!
Fine. That's
the
cool.
Base on the moon!
Which normally is reserved solely for supervillains, so it's kind of a little bit disappointing in this case. But I think the reason that the two Chinese characters in the movie happen to be related is because it shows that she has a strong sense of family values, which in China is something highly reserved. And this movie has a lot about that. So we have Will Smith's son, who is now like the leader of this legacy squadron, and then we see his mother, who dies, which is very sad for him.
Yeah.
Then we have Jeff Goldblum and his dad, who almost dies, but thankfully he doesn't. Then we have the president's daughter and the president from the original one. Then we have Angela Baby and her uncle. And I feel like there's a lot of family coincidences in this movie that everyone just so happens to be related to everybody else. Kind of in an incestuous way, almost.
Yeah.
But I feel like the Angela Baby, like, he is the uncle for the sole reason of going, well, everyone else has family relations. Like, we need to, if we're going to have two Chinese characters, then that sense of strong family values needs to be promoted. And I think that probably has a lot.
And it also means
he's not just a strong Chinese character. He's the uncle.
It also means that they can speak Chinese to each other in the movie as well. Because there's one scene where they first meet each other on the moon base. And they have a short conversation with each other in Chinese, which is obviously wonderful.
In front of the Chinese flag.
In front of a Chinese flag, yes, of course, because in case anybody couldn't understand or couldn't recognize Chinese, or they had no idea at all what country they're for, the giant bright red Chinese flag behind them is a subtle indicator of the nationality of these two commanding pilots. But I'm just looking on the Wikipedia page, actually, and of Rain Lao, a Chinese pilot and lieutenant in ESD, and the niece of ESD Moon Base Commander Zhang Lao. While still a child, Rain, Chinese name Lao Meifeng, lost her mother after the aliens' first attack, and later her father, who was one of the pilots that participated in the final battle against the aliens in China during the war. She was then raised by her late father's brother, which I didn't know any of that from watching the movie.
But I think we could kind of probably guess it.
And
make those kind of connections. But yeah, I think this is really the prime example right now of this kind of the pandering that we're talking about between China and America, because Independence Day Resurgence would have no success in China if it wasn't for this kind of loose connection. I mean, saying that, it may do, because as we'll go on to talk about in a minute, China has love for spectacle movies, and Independence Day Resurgence has made a lot of promotion out of the fact that it's all about the spectacle, in the same way that the first one was back in 1996. But this is how they're sticking their hooks into the audience, the Chinese audience. Not only have they got a pop culture icon in it, but then they've got the funny guy who the Chinese audiences can laugh at as he tries to speak Chinese. So there's the Western Liam Hemsworth's friend. Has one line where he tries to say "you are pretty" in Chinese, and he says it so badly that everybody in the Western audience can be kind of like, all right, cool. And the Chinese audience could be like, the Laowai, the foreigner, he's trying to speak Chinese and he can't. Just like everybody did to us in the taxis. Not that I'm resentful, but...
It feels to me a little bit racist in the way that this guy tries to speak it. Chinese is a difficult language and not really known to many outside of China. And he's obviously playing a character that's supposed to be first trying to learn it, but to me, he still sounds like a really, I don't know, like 80s person trying to speak Chinese, like trying to imitate like a Chinese voice, just doing like a really racist thing. Like to me, it didn't sit very well. But to everybody else in the Chinese theatre, they're like, oh, look, he's trying to speak Chinese. It's so funny, because to them it's comical, and they don't seem to kind of pick up on that level of racism, or they don't see it as racism. They're just enthralled by a foreigner trying to speak their language, which seems to be one of the funniest things for Chinese people.
They love it, and they love it because especially in China, because for a lot of Chinese people, unless you're from one of the big cities like Beijing or Shanghai or Guangdong or something like that. Sorry, Guangdong is a province, Guangzhou. The number of foreigners that you are likely to have met is slim.
Yeah.
And so everyone that you have met, especially where we lived last year, we lived in a city called Zunyi, where we were 2 of 12 foreigners in a city of around 8 million people. Like, for the vast majority of people in these cities, they have never met anybody who doesn't speak fluent Chinese.
Yeah.
So when they meet somebody who doesn't speak fluent Chinese, it's a point of hilarity. Because imagine the first time in your life ever you meet somebody who doesn't speak perfect English. You'd be like, I don't understand. Because all of your friends, all of your family, everyone you've ever met in shops, taxis, buses, the airport, anything, all speak fluent Chinese. And then all of a sudden somebody gets in your taxi who doesn't, and you're like, well, firstly, you're white, what are you doing here? And then you happen to speak the language in a way that is funny to them, like, that's funny. And so to go to the cinema, and if one of the other highest grossing movies in China is the Fast and Furious movies, that they don't make any effort to speak Chinese in those movies, so they don't expect white people to. So when they do, it's like, not only are they white people, but they're speaking our language, and even better, they're speaking it wrong.
Yeah, ha 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 ha. But also, to go back to your point earlier, the character that does try to do this, obviously Liam Hemsworth's best buddy friend, you said was the guy that should die, but doesn't, because...
He should have died.
He should have died. Spoiler alert. He doesn't die because of his... He needs to have this continued relationship with Angela Baby. Like, she needs to do something in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't do anything in this movie but pout and deliver a few horrible lines in English. She doesn't do anything else. But she's got to do something. Like, they need a reason for her to be in the movie within the story. So it's got to be for one of these other pointless side characters that shouldn't be there, so that there can be like a love interest and there can be some sort of continued story for like the Chinese audiences to follow. And again, it's like Chinese with a foreign guy, which is also something else that they're interested in as well.
Unless you're a traditional family, in which case bringing home a Western guy is pretty much the worst thing you can possibly do. But the thing about this is the white guy is really interested in her, and she's like, degaff.
Yeah.
Like,
so she's got all the power.
At the end of the movie, at the end of the movie, she doesn't like spurn his advances, but she's like, let's have dinner first, or something like that. So it's like, she's in command of this Western relationship, which is something that responds perfectly well to them.
But she's also...
So all right, that's pretty much as much as we can say for Independence Day in this case. I think it's probably worth just speaking about this in a bit more detail. And what we were saying about movies that work well in China. And I always found when we talked about movies in the classes before with the students, the Western movies that they love the most are always the ones that have either a Chinese influence or that had something filmed in China. Like, for example, Avatar or Transformers Age of Extinction had 2 scenes filmed in a particular area of China that in the country is renowned for being just the most incredible, beautiful place that you can possibly imagine. And it's like a paradise. It's the kind of thing that you see in Avatar and go, well, this must be an alien planet. There's nowhere on Earth that is this beautiful.
Yeah.
But there is. It's this province in China. And then they took that province and then they CGI'd it and made it all floating islands. That China doesn't have floating islands. I should specify that. But like that kind of jungle and that wildlife and the forest and everything, that does exist. It's in China and it is a massive source of national pride. So when Western movies come to China and appreciate that and then put it in their movies, that's why Avatar is, I'm pretty sure, looking on the highest grossing films in China, is the only one out of 50 that was made before 2010.
Yeah, it's the oldest film on the list.
Yeah,
2009,
because like Avatar did, it is still like the highest grossing movie ever internationally, but in China it's like it's the highest grossing for by a long way of any movie made before 2010.
Yeah.
By a point of billions. And this is because it made a deliberate point of showing an area of China to the world that they hadn't seen before. And so for the Chinese audiences, this is the West acknowledging it and showing it. And so when you say, and the same in Transformers Age of Extinction, Optimus Prime has a huge battle. In fact, there's a bit where they punch them over Hong Kong Harbour or something like that. Again, to show that, like Pacific Rim is another good example of a Western movie that has a lot to do in Hong Kong. Because it doesn't need to be in Hong Kong, but it does show an interest that the West has in Asia.
Well, yeah, you've pretty much nailed it on the head right there. Anything that promotes China pretty much does pretty well in the Chinese markets. But if it doesn't promote China, as long as it's something over the top, crazy and dramatic, is also probably going to do pretty well in China, because it's pretty different to what most of Chinese cinema is. Because most of Chinese cinema just focuses on really, well, I'll say it from my point of view, really bad war stories or comedy reinterpretations of ancient Chinese books or fables. So anything that's utterly ludicrous, Furious 7, stands a good chance of doing well in China because it's just ridiculous and hilarious and kind of a new form of cinema that is interesting to them. And like most of the movies, or the top grossing movies in China, are pretty much all in the last 2 years. Pretty much 2015, 2016. Whereas for us in the West, we have a lot of films are recent, but we have a lot of films from 97 or 2003 or 2006, 93, 99, like 2001. Whereas back then in China, like, they were still just making war films about the Japanese. So all of these new Western movies that are coming over here, whether it be Warcraft or Avatar or Furious 7, they're bringing something completely new to the Chinese audiences that they've never seen before.
Yeah, and that is a major influence, is the fact that China is now opening up to the West in a way that it hasn't before, which is incredible for promoting Western cinema around the world. But it also means that if Western cinema wants to work, it has to do something that appeals to them, which wasn't ever a concern before.
Yes.
Like, you never see Western cinema deliberately appealing to Japan, because Japan has grown up on Western cinema. You never see Western cinema appealing deliberately to the UK, because the UK has grown up on Western cinema. China, on the other hand, has not grown up on Western cinema. So they have no interest in seeing things like Star Wars, because nobody had heard of Star Wars in China until The Force Awakens came out. And that being said, generally the Disney and the producers of Star Wars were disappointed by how well Star Wars did in China.
Yeah.
It's still the 31st highest grossing movie of all time in China. It's not like it did badly.
Yeah, but it grossed less than Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Let's say.
Yeah.
Which I don't like.
Yeah.
If you think worldwide Star Wars Force Awakens is the third highest grossing movie of all time, And then you look at China and it's only the 31st. Like, that's quite a big difference between those two movies. Or it shows how much, how different the markets are in the two places. Because obviously none of the previous Star Wars movies were released in China. And there isn't anything really pro-China within The Force Awakens. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Like, well, they have a couple of the characters that were in the raid, but that's Asian, not necessarily specifically Chinese.
Yeah, well, this is why in Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One, that's coming out in this December, there are two Chinese characters in the movie. There's Donnie Yen, who is one of the most recognizable Chinese actors, just generally around the country. And unfortunately, I can't remember the other guy's name. But yeah, there are these two Chinese characters who are now coming into Rogue One. But as far as I can tell, from memory, they are one of the only Asian characters, or two of the only Asian characters, other than the guys from the raid, to ever pop up in Star Wars, except for the highly racist Japanese stereotypes from the prequels. You know, the aliens that were like, oh no, the Jedi, they're like horrendously racist, and appeal to nobody. And when I was teaching last year, I said, oh, Star Wars is coming out. And they were like, what Star Wars? And I showed them the beginning of Star Wars, and they were like, I have never seen this before in my life.
Yeah.
Which is why it doesn't mean anything. And there would have been a similar problem with the Jurassic Park movies when Jurassic World was released, if Jurassic World wasn't about dinosaurs.
Yes. Again,
and this this kind of like feeds back into the spectacle side of things, and also probably plays a fair part in why Jurassic World is kind of a retcon of the previous movies. So like, Jurassic World doesn't reference Jurassic Park 2 or Jurassic Park 3. It only references the first one, in that there is an island, a theme park, dinosaurs, and why they can tread the similar story over again, because this market, the second biggest market in the world, has never seen Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
To the point where when Jurassic World comes out, and I'm like, oh, it was okay, but it's not as good as the first one. They're like, the first one?
Are you mad?
And I think it's going to be... It's going to be similar with Independence Day. Like, you were on the subway the other day, and somebody was sat there on their phone watching the first Independence Day.
They were,
because they didn't even know this was a movie before. They had no knowledge of this movie as having existed. But now they're being opened up to this world, to 60 to 100 years of Western cinema, and they want to swallow as much of it as they can.
Yeah, but I think the Chinese cinema is quite clever in the way that it does this, in the way that I feel, anyway, this could just be my personal views, that they don't just let any old movie come into China. Like, they are interested in preserving Chinese cinema as well. So not every American movie gets released in China. It's usually only the biggest releases of the moment, which is why most of the highest grossing movies in China are like massive American movies. But at the same time, China are taking advantage of Hollywood wanting to get into their market by making sure that they get something out of it in return. Now, whether that be the promotion of an Asian star, e.g. Angela Baby in Independence Day Resurgence, or a filming location of somewhere...
Or Jay Chow.
Yeah, or a filming location somewhere within China to promote the region. Like, come here, this is where Avatar was shot. Like, I've seen numerous posters of things like that around China. And I think they can be quite aggressive in their negotiations, because I cannot comprehend beyond any reason why, if you were the producers or directors of Independence Day Resurgence, why you would cast a unknown to the West actress in Angela Baby, who isn't an actress, who can barely speak English, who has no previous big movie release knowledge. She means nothing to anybody in the West. Like, why would you cast her in this role in the movie? Like, if you wanted someone in the script to represent like Chinese pilots, pick any of the other established Chinese female actresses. Like, okay, they don't have the instant recognizable factor that Angela Baby does within China, but like, who outside of China really knows who Angela Baby is? So it's not going to make any difference to their Western markets if they get, say, like a B-list Chinese actress to do it, but someone who can actually act. Whereas compared to Angela Baby, who can't. But, of course, that doesn't help the Chinese market as much, and doesn't help promote, like, beautiful Chinese women, let's say. So I imagine that in order for Independence Day Resurgence to get such a wide release and so much press within China, I think there was some deals or some negotiations going on within the movie to make sure that there were certain characters or certain locations used to also help promote China at the same time, which I think is just my views. But I think, like, and why not? Like, why not do that? That's the power that China have at the moment over Hollywood. Basically, they can say that, okay, if you want to take advantage of the second largest market in the world, then we want you to film in this location, or we want there to be 2 Chinese flags in the movie at some point, and we would like you to use this actress. We would like this. Like any negotiation, like, they're in demand, so they can basically demand what they want back, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think as well. Like, you think of the number of big movies or big series that are now starting to take advantage of China in that way. Like, there are a lot. It's not a coincidence that Skyfall happened to have a scene in Macau.
Yeah.
Macau, and then a bit. Was there maybe a bit in Shanghai as well?
I'm not sure. I think it was just Macau. I think it was also Macau in Independence Day Resurgence as well.
Oh, really?
I'm not sure if it was mainland China. It may have been Macau. But anyway, still, it's the same thing.
Yeah, so... Yeah, and then again, you have Now You See Me Too, which came out recently.
Yes, they're in Macau again.
Where we have... Yeah, and you have the Jay Chou, who is essentially like a pop star kind of icon.
Yeah.
Who I think I shared a picture on Awful Commentary Facebook page the other day of a Jay Chou concert, which is just rammed. Like, he is insanely popular in China, which is why he has a big role in this movie, because nobody in the West cares that Jay Chou is in the movie. But should you go to the Hong Kong subway, then as you're walking along and you see the Now You See Me posters, there will be one poster with Woody Harrelson, Jesse Eisenberg, and the other 2 main cast members on it, and then there will be 3 posters with Jay Chou.
And also Mark Ruffalo.
Jay Chou.
Go on.
Yeah, and then, Mark Ruffalo will have maybe 1 poster, but then Jay Chou and Daniel Radcliffe will have like 3 posters each, because he was Harry Potter and they know who he is.
But Mark Ruffalo also speaks a little bit of Mandarin in the movie as well.
Yes, as again, like another boost. And then there was Warcraft, which doesn't inherently appeal to, like, there's nothing about Warcraft that screams appealing to the Chinese market. But
it is just
the movie of Warcraft disappointed in the US, but is the 8th highest grossing movie of all time in China. But while it is still being released, it's already the 8th and it's still going. Because those kind of video games, like console gaming was banned in China, so online computer gaming was the only form of gaming in the country. World of Warcraft is one of the biggest ones internationally, so any movie based off of an MMO is going to get a huge amount
it's that kind of, it's their kind of movie. Like, it's monsters, it's like a little bit over the top, there's magic, like there's all sorts of weird stuff going on. Like, it's kind of the perfect movie for the Chinese market, and the sales have shown that.
Yes, yeah, and it's especially different because, as you were saying, the majority of Chinese movies, because of the way, in many ways, because of how they're censored, are either romance movies, Chinese history movies, or reinterpretations of old Chinese stories.
Yeah.
And so we were just looking at some of the highest grossing movies. We have Journey to the West, Conquering the Demons, Journey to the West, Conquering the Demons 2, which is coming out soon, The Monkey King, Monkey King 2, Monkey King 3, but they're all the same story. Journey to the West is the story that features the Monkey King, and yet there are two separate franchises doing the same story with multiple sequels because it's the most famous story. Oh, sorry, not Monkey King 3, Monkey King Hero is Back. Not The Hero is Back. Hero is Back. Because it's something that everybody in China knows, and this is a country of 1.6 billion people with different experiences who in many places don't speak the same language. They speak variations of the same language, which isn't the same thing.
Yeah.
And so for Chinese cinema, the only thing that they can all unifiedly get behind is romance, because that's universal, Chinese history, because they all learn about it in school, and the stories that they all know.
Yeah.
And that's what gets past the censors. The only difference to this being Monster Hunt, which was...
Again, something...
I really wanted to see it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. But again, to me, it sounds like something in the vein of Warcraft.
Yes, I think it's a fairly similar thing. But from what I know, there is actually no hunting of monsters, which, it is quite disappointing.
God damn it!
But it's that kind of big CGI fantasy comedy thing that massively appeals.
Exactly.
And that's what puts it in the same... But it has no success outside of China. Inside of China, it has massive, being one of the highest grossing movies of all time. But outside of China, if you were to go to the UK and say, "Oh, did you watch Monster Hunt?" they'd be like, "Huh?
What's that?"
And I think we're not likely to see that same kind of Chinese movies influencing the West, the same way the Hong Kong movies did 20 years ago. Because 20 years ago, well, even as far back as the 70s with Bruce Lee, Hong Kong movies were released to some success in the West. But Chinese movies will never have that because they are deliberately insular. They're not trying to appeal to other countries, or they're not trying to appeal to the West. They're trying to appeal solely to China. Whereas the West is now trying to reach that market as well. And so I don't think this is a trend we're going to see stopping anytime soon.
We haven't really even spoken about the censoring as well. Because obviously, going back to what I said earlier about China being able to kind of bargain with Hollywood about the movies, they also censor anything that they don't like either. Anything from sex scenes, something ridiculous. The most obvious time I've experienced it was actually watching the Point Break reboot or remake, and there was one scene where two of the characters were snuggling down for the evening for some romancing, and then there was just a hard... Yeah, I know, right? Just a hard black cut. Maybe 4 frames of just black before it cut to the next scene. It was what was going on here? So it was pretty obvious that the rest of that scene had been cut out. I've also heard things about, if a Chinese guard was shot or something, or a Chinese henchman was beaten up, these segments have been cut out of numerous different movies. So, China's... And
on top of that, for example, with Deadpool...
Oh, it just didn't release it.
Banned its release.
Because it was just too violent or whatever. So, again...
And that's the power that the Chinese market has.
Yeah, exactly.
And Ryan Reynolds was like, well, fine, we'll just release it illegally on Chinese streaming websites.
Yeah.
But then the Chinese government will hunt those down and stop them because they have complete control of the internet.
Yeah.
And... it would be very difficult for a Western government to say, we are not releasing this movie anymore. In the 80s, you had all the kind of video nasties things with, extreme horror movies, where you'd be like, we're not letting anybody see this. But it would be very difficult now for you to justify banning a movie in the West because it's funny.
Yeah.
Deadpool is humorous. And it got a release in Hong Kong because Hong Kong has separate rules, and it enjoyed incredible success in Hong Kong. But those aren't the kind of values that they want promoted in China.
Yeah.
And although it's a superhero movie in the same way as Captain America can get through because he represents good moral judgment, whereas Deadpool represents shooting bullets up his own butthole and, having cancer face. And cancer face is probably enough. Like, that alone is enough to get the movie, to stop it being released.
But again, like, the censors are another thing that probably a lot of Hollywood movie producers are taking into account as well when they're making their movies. It's not just, okay, can we get distribution within China? It's, is this scene going to get cut? Like, is it important? Do we care if it gets cut? Like, what's going on in this scene? I don't know. Like, I could be extrapolating, like, quite far. But, I mean, in the worst case scenario...
I think that's fair enough, because
if you had an if you had an important character or something that, I don't know, you wanted to die or whatever, and he was Chinese, like, the Chinese cinema board or whatever could want to cut that or could not want to release it because of that. So that changes it could change your script or, like, change your movie.
And and in a lot of cases in the editing process, a lot of movies receive those kind of cuts when they're on the borderline between, say, an R rating and then whatever is below an R rating in the US. For the UK, it would be like an 18 movie and a 15 movie.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to get it to more of a market, then you might trim down the sex scenes or cut out some of the gore so you can get that much more of a market in for your movies.
Yeah.
The most famous ones being, like, trying to cut it down from, like, a PG-13 to the one below that, or in the UK, like,
or getting it
a
down
12
to a
PG.
PG-13 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, so that you have that much more of a market. So not only do you have to cut it down to beat the US rating system, you then have to make sure your movie just isn't being cut by the Chinese when it gets there.
Yeah.
Which is quite a big factor to take in.
Because I think there was a few scenes from Skyfall that got cut, if I'm not mistaken, of just random, like...
Well, because he does like, assassinate some Chinese security guards, doesn't he? Like,
yeah, just kill some
sniper rifle and,
something.
like, silent pistol some guys.
Which, like, in those...
When he throws them into the Komodo dragon pen.
Yeah, that's it. Or, like, some scenes like that, which don't really affect the movie at all. Like, so it doesn't really matter that much. But still, like, that's what... Ultimately, China has the ultimate control of everything that goes on within its cinema before and after kind of release, or, like, after you've negotiated, okay, we'll film these scenes in Macau or whatever, and then they're like, okay, yeah, sure, and then you give them the final cut and they're like, no, we don't want this, we're going to cut this, and we're going to cut this.
Yeah, and they don't do it with the editing grace of Hollywood cinema either. They don't do it in a way that is a clever cut that you're like, okay, I didn't quite notice that something.
It's just like a butcher's knife to the reel.
With a red screen that says the Chinese government changed this.
Yeah, the worst one I said was the one in Point Break, where it's just like blank for like a second's worth of black, and then it cut to like something else really random, like really harsh, obvious cuts as well.
Yeah, and I think, like, we've spoken a lot of about a lot of ways in which this is perhaps having an impact on Western cinema. Some of it is negative, some of it doesn't necessarily make too much of a difference, except for the number of the diversity of the cast that is going in very one direction.
Yeah.
Like, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but, like, for example, if you look at Star Trek, you have Sulu, and Sulu is this is a really horrible phrase to use, but he is ambiguously Asian.
Yeah.
Like, the character of Sulu has been played by George Takei, and unfortunately the actor whose name I can't remember now, but they are from two different Asian countries, and Sulu is named after a sea in Asia that borders 5 or 6 different Asian countries, like the Sulu, I think it's the Sulu Sea or something along those lines, because Sulu is an Asian character who represents all of Asia. And as we're seeing diversity bloom in Hollywood, or as we should be seeing diversity bloom in Hollywood, we're also seeing it going very much now in the direction of just one country in Asia, which is a shame, because before, if you had, like, you have characters like those from the Raid in Star Wars, when else in Star Wars are you going to be seeing Indonesian or Malaysian actors popping up in that kind of Hollywood film?
Yeah.
Which you're not. And now, as Hollywood tries to tailor itself more to that market, you're probably going to be seeing less of an international influence and more of an American and Chinese influence.
Yeah, we're all for diversity, and my biggest problem is that just the dumb and obvious way that I think in like Independence Day Resurgence is like the worst culprit of this in the way that they've tried to accommodate this. It just seems so ham-fisted and like blatant. There's no tact or subtlety done with it. Now, whether their hand was forced to do it in that kind of way, like, we'll never know. But hopefully, like, Hollywood can find a way that it can appeal to the Chinese markets and allow everybody, all the billions of people in China, to see their movies whilst still keeping the quality at the same level, or not coming at the detriment of like the story, or having like awful characters in there for no reason. Like I said, there are hundreds and probably thousands of like great Chinese actresses or actors that should probably be in more Hollywood films, and hopefully they get picked and just not more token Chinese celebrities who don't have any talent for acting.
Yeah, I think appealing to this market is not necessarily is not in itself a negative thing, because one of the biggest problems that we have between the UK or the US and China is that culturally we've been separated for 50 years. Our cultures have been deliberately split apart. And so when we talk to somebody, not only do you have a language barrier to get over, but you also have the problem of not really having much in common. And the difference now is that we are starting to have these things in common. We're starting to be able to go, oh, I loved Avengers. Oh, I loved Avengers. Or we could say, I loved Independence Day. Oh, I loved Independence Day. And then I watched the first one, and that's really great too. And so by doing something that deliberately works for both of us, you build a kind of cultural bridge that is better for everyone. The only problem could be if, in building this cultural bridge, we censor ourselves because it won't be allowed to get through to them. If we're deliberately censoring the art that we produce because a dictatorship doesn't allow that art to be shown, then that's still censorship.
Yeah, it's like a false projection of ourselves to be able to cross the bridge kind of thing.
Yeah, and to be able to say, well, in the US, we have freedom of speech, but then not to have freedom of speech because you're trying to make money in somewhere that doesn't, that's to me, that's unacceptable. But, this is the game we're going to play for the next 10 to 20 years, and as both cultures open up and grow together, then I'm sure we'll see something that works. That works for everyone in a unified government, Steve. A unified world that doesn't have Australians.
Oh, I'm in. I'm all over it.
This is what I've learned from Independence Day. We're all equal in the face of an alien invasion, except for Australians, because they should really just be American.
And that's all, folks. Don't be Australian.
And that's so. Thank you for joining us on Awful Commentary as we talk about something just a little bit different to our usual thing. We hope you'll join us next time. Bye.
Boom.